The newsday continues here on One News Now Business. I'm Diego Castro. Here are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate fronts. The growth of the Philippine economy is expected to slow further in the coming quarters as consumer spending eases. In its latest report, Nomura Global Markets Research downgraded its GDP forecast for the country in the second quarter to 5.6%. That's down from the 6.4% projection it gave last month. Nomura also trimmed its growth outlook for the third quarter to 4.8%, slightly lower than the initial 4.9% forecast. Nomura says it expects domestic consumer spending growth to continue moderating, given a decline in purchasing power. The firm also says it sees public infrastructure spending likely improving, given the government's prioritization. However, Nomura says this would be offset by headwinds to be faced by private investment from sharply higher interest rates. Export growth is also seen to weaken due to unexpected slowdown in the U.S. economy in the third quarter. The Energy Department expects power supply to stabilize with the construction of new generating projects. Business World quoted DOE Secretary Rafael Lotilla as saying that there will be new power sources in the next 2 to 3 years. On June 19, the agency will conduct the second round of Green Energy Auction Program, which will offer over 11,600 megawatts in capacity. Meanwhile, another Business World report stated that renewable energy could account for a third of the government's target investment approvals. Trade Secretary Fred Pascual said significant investments are expected to be made in related industries like solar cell manufacturing. According to Pascual, many investors are interested in RE projects in the Philippines, including those from Europe, the US, China, Australia, and Japan. The Transportation Department says a private firm may be awarded the contract to operate the Ninoy Aquino International Airport early next year. According to Executive Assistant Jonathan Gesmundo of the Transportation Department's Office of the Secretary, the agency has reached a quote, point of no return in planning the privatization of the airport. In an interview with the chiefs, Gesmundo said the DOTR and the National Economic and Development Authority are set to discuss the matter in a meeting this week. Gesmundo says they will be tackling government plans to make NAIA operations more efficient with the help of a private firm. The official also says there may already be a tentative timetable for the process.
Medyo konting hintay lang. Yung NAIA, okay, so next week magkakaroon na ng meeting ang DOTR at saka ang NEDA. And ang per si Yusek Tabiling, ang kanyang projection is that by first quarter next year, we might be able to award or to select the winning bidder and then magsisimula na siya. Or if all of the processes ay walang hitches, then Yusek Lim sees na by first quarter of next year
Amid concerns of possible hikes in terminal fees, Gesmundo says it would be up to the new concessionaire to decide if it would implement increases in fees. However, Gesmundo says the government will still make sure that any increase will be within reason.
The concessionaire will need revenues para sa operations, para dun sa kanilang papagandahin infrastructure. When in an airport is privatized, you are not given 100% pwede mong gawin ang lahat ng gusto mong gawin. So titingnan pa rin ng mga ahensya kung it is detrimental to the public, to the passengers. Kaya kapag may say pa rin ang government kung itutuloy nila any increases, let's say, in terminal fees.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Diego Castro. On to some sports news. The Denver Nuggets won their first ever NBA championship after defeating Miami Heat in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. The Nuggets' 94-89 victory against Miami puts an end to their franchise's near half-century quest for their first ever NBA title. Nikola Jokic led Denver with 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 14 assists. The Toll Regulatory Board defends its approval of the toll fee hike at the North Luzon Expressway or NLEX. Speaking to Radio 5's Ted Filon and DJ Chacha, TRB spokesman Julius Corpus says the toll hike was long overdue. He explains that the NLEX petition for the toll fee increase way back in 2012, 2014, 2018, and again in 2020. Under the law, NLEX may request to hike rates every 2 years, but this was not immediately approved due to some requirement issues. Corpus also clarified that only half of the approved rates hike was implemented to lighten the burden of motorists. Corpus notes, though, that the rates may increase further as NLEX still has a pending petition from last year. Starting Tuesday, NLEX will be implementing a 7 peso increase in rates for the open system and a 36 centavo hike per kilometer in the closed system.
Tama po, hati lang po ang pinayagan ng ating tanggapan at pumayag naman po ang ating concessionaire, ang NLEX, to do the same para makatulong po sa pag-iktan ng toll fee increase na to. Meron po silang petition na hinain, Sir Ted, no, yung 2022, subalit ito'y dumadaan pa rin po sa tamang proseso at tamang pagsusuri ng ating tanggapan. Kaya we expect this thing to be acted upon once the review is totally done.
The United States Department of Agriculture has identified the Philippines as a key contributor to the anticipated rise in global rice consumption in 2024. According to a report by the Philippine Star, the USDA forecasts rice consumption in the Philippines to increase to 16.5 million metric tons. This surpasses the previous projection of 16.3 million metric tons, as well as the anticipated local rice production of 12.6 million metric tons. To address the shortfall, the USDA projects Manila importing 3.8 million metric tons of rice. Meanwhile, the El Niño phenomenon is seen to cut rice production in Southeast Asia, raising possible increases in food prices. Pag-asa earlier estimated the El Niño phenomenon to last until the first quarter of 2024. Aside from the dry season, the conflict in Ukraine, limited fertilizer supply, and restrictive trade policies are also seen to push rice prices. One agriculture group seeks relief from the NLEX toll hike to minimize its impact on food prices. The Samahang Industriya ng Agrikultura called for the return of special lanes set up during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. SINAG Executive Director Jason Cainglet told Business World that trucks for food deliveries should be granted free passes on expressways. Cainglet also urged the Agriculture Department to work with local government units to eliminate arbitrary fees being collected by municipalities. He explained that if such fees are eliminated, traders would not use them as an excuse to increase the prices of commodities. The average Farmgate price of palay or rice in the country saw a 6.5% in March on a year-on-year basis. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority showed that the average Farmgate price of rice stands at 18 pesos and 57 centavos as of March this year. That's 6.5% up from 17 pesos and 43 centavos in the same month a year ago. The March 2023 figure is also 2.1% higher than the price in February 2023. The PSA also reports positive year-on-year growth rates in prices of rice across all regions. According to PSA data, the Ilocos region posted the highest annual increase of 11.6%. The average Farmgate price of palay at the national level for the first quarter was also computed at 18 pesos and 17 centavos. That's 4.2% increase from the same period of last year. Generative AI doesn't just reflect existing stereotypes, it may well exacerbate them. Analysis by Bloomberg News of thousands of AI-generated images produced concerning results.
According to generative AI, this is what a lawyer looks like. And this is what a housekeeper looks like. Can you see the problem? It's not restricted to just these two job profiles. Generative AI has a serious problem with bias. We carried out an experiment with Stable Diffusion, perhaps the biggest open source platform for AI-generated images. We asked it to create thousands of images of workers for 14 jobs, and then we analyzed the result.
The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks the race and gender of workers in every occupation through a monthly household survey, making it possible to draw comparisons between the results generated by Stable Diffusion and the U.S. labor force. It's a reasonable measuring stick since the information used to train AI systems is typically gleaned from the internet, which is dominated by data and images from the US.
Women and people with darker skin tones were underrepresented for images of high-paying jobs and overrepresented across images of low-paying jobs. Take judges, for example. Women made up just 3% of the images for that job, but 34% of US judges are women. For fast food workers, the model generated people with darker skin tones 70% of the time, even though 70% of fast food workers in the US are white. Some 90% of online content could be artificially generated by 2026. As things stand, AI has the potential to exacerbate stereotypes, which in turn exacerbate gender and racial inequality, particularly in the workplace. A coordinated effort to address bias by the organizations developing generative AI models could help get ahead of the problem. Stable Diffusion, for its part, is working on an initiative to develop open source models that will be trained on datasets specific to different countries and cultures in order to mitigate the problem.
A spokesperson for Stability AI, a London-based startup that distributes Stable Diffusion, said, quote, "All AI models have inherent biases that are representative of the datasets they are trained on. By open sourcing our models, we aim to support the AI community and collaborate to improve bias evaluation techniques and develop solutions beyond basic prompt modification."
Given the accelerating pace of AI adoption, time is short.
And those are the top business stories of the hour. I'm Diego Castro. Join us again at 2 p.m. We are One News, all sides, all the time.